All right. Welcome to What a Word is Worth, a space for creative minds to speak about viable ways to heal the world through writing and other inventive mediums. I am your host, Marianela Medrano, founder of Palabra Training Center, where words are giving us medicine. Palabra Training Center is dedicated to creating a more compassionate and just world by training those who are invested and committed to making change possible. We offer writing workshops and mental wellness retreats to teach emotional and psychological flexibility through mindfulness and other Indigenous ways. We welcome people from all walks of lives, financial means, and physical challenges to join us. If you would like to learn more or feel inspired to support us, please visit palabracenter.org. Today, my guest is Monique Lang. She is a psychotherapist, teacher, writer, and healer. For over 40 years, she has worked with and help individuals, groups, and communities find healing. Trained in internal family systems, past life regression, EMDR, Gestalt, psychoanalysis, comprehensive resource model, Reiki, mindfulness practices, and shamanic techniques, Monique brings a depth of presence and gentleness to her work with people in her counseling practice, her teaching, her writing, and as leader of workshops and journeys to visit and learn from Indigenous healers. She served on the executive committee and was faculty member of the Trauma Studies program at the Institute for Contemporary Psychotherapy and is a board member of Aldea Counseling Services. She has been on the faculties of Columbia University School of Social Work, the State University of New York, and Mercy College Department of Psychology. Monique has presented at the Omega Institute for Holistic Studies, Kripalu Center for Yoga and Health, the New York Open Center, Internal Family System Yearly Conference, and the Mid-Atlantic Conference. She is the author of Meditations and Ceremonies for Healing and Healing from Post-Traumatic Stress and Journey to Wholeness. Monique is based in Syracuse, New York, and works both in person and virtually. What a pleasure to have you here, Monique.
Marianela, so glad to be with you. And, as a friend of mine would say, you look really good on paper.
You do, but then you look even better in person.
Oh,
That
thank you.
that
Flattery
was
will get you everywhere.
No, that was my experience. I read about you. I heard an interview, and I was like, I must talk to this person, this wonderful Monique. And
Because
then
we're
when
sisters.
yes, exactly. Thank you for saying that. So Monique, you are having quite a beautiful journey through life. How did you come to love words and to see the healing power that lies in them? Just to start with, I mean, we are a podcast that digs into what a word is worth. So let's start there.
So, I kind of got pushed into it.
Mm,
When it all started, when, no, actually, it started before that. A friend, in 1980 something, a friend of mine said, there are no books for post traumatic stress. And I said, well, then we should write one. And so we wrote it. And then when I was teaching at the at the Institute for Contemporary Psychotherapy in the trauma program, I would start I was teaching a group process, and I would start every meeting with a meditation. And one of my students said, well, where do you get these meditations from? And I was like, I kind of just make it up as it goes. And then she started recording it. And then I decided that as a graduation present for the class, it was a small class, there were 12 people. I wrote the meditations down, had them bound, and gave them the book and didn't think much more of that. And then one thing that I don't even remember how it happened, it got published.
How beautiful, and how lucky we are to
Well,
have
thank
your
you.
book. I mean, it's a workbook that really helps individuals in a way chunk down the process, the healing process. And the practices are so accessible, so non-intimidating, that I think it's really a true great gift for those, you know, who need it for themselves, and those who are healers and can use it as an instrument. So that I'm so glad that you were pushed into the word of uh, language, and that you were able to write down that wisdom that was probably, I mean, that's the ancestral wisdom speaking through you, right?
Right,
Yeah,
literally.
yeah,
Because, people say, oh, it's so hard to write a book. I don't write a book, the book writes me,
exactly. I love it.
So,
I love it.
so
Yeah.
apparently I have another one coming, but they haven't told me what it is yet.
Uh-huh. Yes. So let's talk about your shamanic training. Is that something you chose, or is it something that chose you?
My life chooses me. I have free will. um, so I used to work at the Omega Institute.
Uh-huh.
I was the staff counselor. And then in 1999, I think, they had the first gathering of shamans where I think it was organized by John Perkins, who brought shamans from medicine people from all over South America. And I had nothing to do that weekend. And a friend of mine said, hey, why don't you come? And I said, sure, why not? That's how my life goes. Somebody says, hey, why don't you do this? And I'm like, okay.
Serendipity, right?
And so I met my first teacher, Ipu Piara, who was because he passed, a shaman from Brazil. And then in 2007, 2008, I actually went down with him and his wife and a group in, and he had a place down the Rio Grande. No, sorry, the Rio Negro.
Negro, Rio Negro.
And that was such an experience to be at the meeting of the waters in Brazil. So I don't know if you've been there, but the Amazon and the Rio Negro meet at what is called the meeting of the waters, which is
Mm.
supposed to be a very sacred place. And the Amazon is kind of like a beigey looking river,
Uh,
and the Rio Negro is black.
uh,
Really, you can't see anything.
uh,
And they flow together, but they don't
mm,
mix,
mm, mm,
which is
mm.
fascinating. And if you jump in the water, which you're not supposed to do, but we did it anyway, the Amazon is warm and the Rio Negro is cold. So anyway, I spent 2.5 weeks with this group, and we visited other tribes.
Mm,
And just by absorption, I mean, I've never had, well, I did train a little bit with Ipupiara, but mostly it's by absorption. You know, you
mm,
watch people, you ask questions, you experience um how it feels and what they're doing. And
right.
it's really hands-on learning.
Yes.
And all of a sudden they say, okay, you do it. And you go, uh, okay, you know. And then fast forward to 2015, I was able to go to Ecuador
Mm,
and to meet other medicine people. And then since then, I've been going to Ecuador 2, 3 times a year. I take groups down to meet with indigenous healers uh, who are, and it's just watching and receiving and being pushed. A lot of being pushed of
but
like,
the way, right? And so the
yeah,
way is by learning with the heart, not so much the mind, or I don't know if there is a separation between the mind and the heart. But I, mhm,
there's a uncle, a shaman from Greenland, no, Iceland. I can't remember, one of those, who used to say that the longest journey in the planet is from your head to your heart.
yes, I have heard that before. And yet the heart is the center that we all have to get to.
Yep.
Is that center of, yes. So you have been observing, you were pushed into taking in, into listening. You know, I have great memories of my trip to Ecuador. We stayed at the Sachawasi community for a day and also spent time at the Amauta Nyampi school in Pastaza, exchanging ideas with both the faculty and the students. And the school, the Amauta Nyampi School, is an intercultural and a school that protects the language of the many nations that congregate there. So I believe the language most spoken is Quechua. They follow the ancient wisdom of relying on the arts and hands-on, as you were saying, to teach. So I was highly inspired by what I saw there. I know the needs are great. And uh, what has been your experience with bringing groups there? How are the communities benefiting from this? Do you support the concept of ecotourism, or do you subscribe to the idea that it dilutes cultural practices?
So we don't do ecotourism.
Mhm,
My co-leader uh, is a native of Ecuador, and
mhm,
she's a herbalist and a curandera and
mhm,
a therapist. And so what we do, and because she's so connected, we were so it's a long process. First, she finds the person, right? And then she and I go and meet the healer. And it's a vetting process. We vet them and they vet us. And, so we go and we talk to them and all of that. And so it, it's not tourism, you know, it's we need to get accepted to come and visit. And when we come and visit, we visit with the intention of learning
Yeah.
and of receiving healings. And then some of them will talk about the cosmology.
Mm-hmm.
Don Oscar particularly loves to talk about cosmology and Indian cosmology. And he's actually going to be doing a 3-part series on the history and use of ayahuasca.
Ah,
So I will send you the link
yes,
as
that's
soon as I get it.
beautiful. I can certainly share that with other people. So yes, I think you and I think then that the efforts that people are doing in these communities, in certain communities that have opened themselves widely to the Western world as a way to survive, is in some ways a way to dilute the sacredness, and that we have to be very careful if we want to be a support, if we want to be an ally, that we are not contributing to the genocides that our cultures have gone through.
You know, it's a double-edged sword. I mean, the way
Mhm.
we contribute by exposing people to the truth, you know, and people sometimes get a little weirded out because
Mhm.
the the healers, the yachako, the papito, will be doing a healings, and kids come walking through, and the chickens are, you know, I mean, I remember once Maria Juana was doing a healing on somebody, and her niece came in and said, the pig just had babies, and she stopped what she was doing, went to look at the pigs, came back and finished what she was doing. You know, there isn't that separation.
Talking about interconnectivity, yes.
Right, there isn't, it's not the sterile thing that when you go to the doctor, right?
Yes,
And
yes,
at first people go, and but then they explain, you know, like it's all like you said, it's all interconnected. So
yeah,
it's the healing and the ceremonies are part of everyday life,
yes, yes,
even
yes,
when they're high ceremonies,
yes,
right?
yeah.
So the way we try to support the indigenous people that we work with is we pay them very well for the healings.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Uh, we pay them what would we what would be an American standard as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to an Ecuadorian
They're
standard.
right, right, right.
And because because on the other hand, I know this particular tribe that has
Mm-hmm,
become more like ecotourism, ayahuasca
mm-hmm,
ecotourism.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
they're beautiful, beautiful people. And I know they're trying to survive,
They're trying to survive, right? It's not a criticism, but we have to
but
be
they've
careful.
lost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's become a little too Hollywoody.
Yes, exactly.
So we're not, you know, and I feel
Which
bad
is,
because I love those people, but I don't
mm-hmm,
want my people to
mm-hmm.
do ecoterrorism.
Mhm. It has happened, throughout the globe
Yeah.
with different communities and the sense of sensationalism that people even they learn it and they want you to see the exoticism in them. It's very sad. It breaks my heart. I remember I was in South India and I was walking down a road, a dirt road, and all of a sudden this woman emerges and she comes up to me, auntie, 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 and she puts a water bottle in her head and starts modeling for me to take her picture. And I didn't understand what was going on, and at the same time, her hand was up to me. She wanted me to pay, and I got it right. I understood the dynamic. I understood what was happening, and it broke my heart. because that's what has happened to our communities. That a sector of our communities have had to go to those means as a surviving mechanism. And it's very sad.
I haven't seen that I haven't seen that in Ecuador.
Mm-hmm.
It could be because in a way we're very sheltered. When we go because we have our own bus, I, who would never take a bus tour, I'm leading one. And the bus says tourism, and I'm like, oh no. But whatever. And the places that we go to, and then one of the things that we do is because all the little communities that we visit have handicraft and creams and
Right.
And we always encourage people to buy.
Yes.
First of all, they're wonderful. But you can spend $5 on whatever, a scarf that you don't need.
But you're contributing.
Exactly.
So going back to the old ways, right? I come from an oral tradition. The Tainos didn't have a written language, so all the wisdom was passed down orally. So I remember a childhood in the Dominican Republic sprinkled with fantastic stories that heightened my imagination and pushed forth the writer in me. So supporting indigenous thinking and way of living is very important, and it's integrated in who I am. In my work with others, I use words as healing, as salutogenic balms that kind of I can pass down, hence the name of this podcast, which I actually owe to my dear Italian-American poet, Reggie Mara, who has a poem that alludes to the title of this podcast, borrowed from his poem. But I have dedicated my scholarship to highlighting indigenous ways and have developed workshops for BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and as inventive ways to create healing. When I came across your work, I felt, as you said before, I have found a sister and an ally in the journey. So tell us more about the earth-based trainings you offer. I think there is one coming up. Can you tell us more about what to expect? What is it that you offer as way to integrate, to facilitate integration?
So it's interesting that you were talking about your lineage, because here in the States, I really pass as white. But
you even fooled me.
But my great-grandmother was pure Mayan. And when I go down to Ecuador to the villages, they go, "Ah, mamita." And I'm like, what? How come you have blue eyes? So it's in my blood, like you said. I wasn't raised that way, but I've come back to my roots. And I feel much more aligned with the Latino culture than with the American culture. So how I came to it.
Or the earth-based offerings that you do.
I realized after leading a few groups down to Ecuador that what the medicine people did was so much more powerful than blah, 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 blah. And I was talking to a colleague of mine, and Michi said, well, it's going from the narrative to the embodiment, so do something about it.
That's it.
Again, I got pushed. I'm like, what do you mean? She said, figure something out.
Mhm.
And so that's how that whole idea of earth-based psychotherapy came up,
Mm.
because it's a way of, it's not dismissing the mental, emotional,
Mm.
cognitive, narrative process, because that's important. It's taking that process and adding and merging a very embodied, traditional way of working, bringing in the elements. So, for example, before you get a healing with any of the mamitas or the taitas, they will pray to the mountains, and they will pray to the waters, and they will pray to the earth, and it takes a very long time. And because they pray to this waterfall and this lake and this river, and at first I was like, okay, just get over. And now I understand that it's about bringing the cosmology, the connectedness of all that there is, into relationship
Mm.
for the healing. And,
Mhm.
as you know, shamanism is animistic, right? And so everything has a spirit, everything has an energy.
Yeah.
And so by using earth, water, fire, and air, and creating ceremonies, creating rituals to embody and concretize the work that you've done mentally, narratively, emotionally, and embodies it, grounds it. One of the reasons I gave up psychoanalysis is that in psychoanalysis, you can talk about something forever. You understand why you do, how you feel, but nothing changes.
Because you don't descend, you don't do the descent process into the
Right.
body. Yeah.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. So this
Mhm.
is about descending in the body, but even
Mhm.
more so, connecting with the earth. Like one of my favorite practice. So I have several favorite. I always say, "Oh, this is one of my favorite practices," and then somebody said to me the other day, "No, but you said this other thing was a." So there's many, right?
Yeah.
But for example, anyone who has been physically abused
Mhm. Mhm.
may still has energetically
Mhm.
the residue of the abuse
Yeah.
in the
Installed
cells.
there. Yeah. Yeah. In the cells. Yeah.
So baths
Mhm.
are wonderful. So you
Mhm.
process, and
Mhm.
then I invite my people to take a bath. And for cleansing, you use what they call bitter herbs.
Mm.
So, for example, in this country, it would be pine, dandelion,
Mm. Mm.
plantain, not platanos, plantain, which is an
Mm.
herb, rosemary. So you cook all of that. You make a very strong tea.
Mm.
And then if you have a bathtub, I used to live in New York City, so
Mm.
people didn't have bathtub.
Mm.
If you have a bathtub, you pour the tea in the water,
Mm.
and you just you imagine that substance leaching out
Mm.
the
Mhm.
remnants
Cleansing.
of the abuse, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
then so according to the shamans,
Mhm.
you do it on a Tuesday or a Friday,
Mhm.
or right after full moon. And I said, well, why? And they say, that's how it is.
No, that sounds so familiar.
Why do you do this? That's how it is. Okay.
Yeah. Like we
But
don't know.
then if you do the bath on a Tuesday, then on a Friday. And, of course, I invite people to light a candle, play
Mhm.
soft music, whatever.
Mhm.
And then if you do it on a Tuesday, you can do it on a Friday, or you can wait a week.
Yeah.
Or if you've done the letting go right after full moon, Right after new moon, you take another bath with fragrances, like wonderful fragrant flowers and herbs, and same
Yeah.
thing. And
Yeah.
now you bring back into your body all the sweetness, all the beautiful, you
So beautiful.
re-own your body.
That's
And
the true integration.
yeah, and you say to yourself, this is my body, my beautiful inviolate body. It is perfect. It is whole. I mean, whatever. And then after that, I invite people to burn a 7-day candle, a pink 7-day candle, to remember, remember your wholeness.
Yes, yes. We're
Uh,
speaking the same language, my goodness.
I know, it's so
Yeah,
exciting.
yeah.
And then, there's if you have another one of my favorites is when people have resentments.
Hmm.
I have them go to the woods and pick up stones
Hmm.
to
Hmm.
represent
Hmm.
each
Each.
resentment, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I have them put them in a backpack or a basket,
Hmm. Hmm.
and to notice how heavy it is to carry
Hmm.
them,
Hmm.
right?
Yes, yes. Talking about landing in the body. Yes,
Right.
that is
And then
beautiful.
either gifting them to the waters or
Hmm.
burying them and giving thanks to the waters, giving thanks to the earth for
Yeah.
taking this burden and transmuting it.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, it is amazing. One of the, when I work with the elements in facilitating mindful writing, one of the things that I remind people is that the elements are within, right? And it's not, I mean, that's not my invention. It's in mindfulness, it's in all indigenous traditions. All the elements are within us, the breath, the blood, everything is within. So I'm like just resonating so powerfully with
Right.
what you're saying. And, going deeper into the curanderismo or shamanism, which are as old as the earth, we know that these are gifted people who have preserved the well-being of so many nations. And they are not so ubiquitous these days. Yet they are at the heart of the diasporas. And they continue to assist people with their trials and tribulations. They are counselors, medicine people, they are the guidance people. They cure both the body and the mind, and they don't see the difference between the two. So how do we preserve curanderismo? How do we preserve this ancient wisdom? And we know our people relied, for instance, in botanicas for their supplies, but they are disappearing. I mean, I don't think there is one where I am in New Haven.
Go to
They
96th Street and Amsterdam Avenue.
So how can we help? I'm always thinking, we know that how the importance of limpias, of understanding ataques de nervios, susto, and other conditions that are diagnosed, as depression, anxiety. So I'm always asking, because I have lived through some things. Like I remember this young woman I used to know in the Dominican Republic who was suffering from what can be easily diagnosed as schizophrenia. She was taking from curandero to curandero, from traditional doctor to traditional doctor, and no one was able to heal her. Then she was sent to the United States. And things got worse. My thesis has been that if she had stayed in the hands of the community surrounded by love and good care, she will have healed. But she was sent to a country that didn't understand. She got lost in the system, and she went to the point of no return. And I saw her a few years ago, and I cried because she is the walking dead. So again, my preoccupation is coming from having witnessed things. So how can people like you and I help
Well,
more?
one of the ways is that we keep doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the things that, so, blah, 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 lots of things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're talking about, because of our personal backgrounds, we're talking mostly about Native American practices. But,
And Africans too.
and African,
Yeah.
and Indian,
Yeah.
and European, and
Yeah.
Irish, and, you know, so shamanism is as ancient and as worldwide.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
called different things, right?
Absolutely.
And actually, shamanism is a made-up word. Michael Harner was doing his dissertation and visiting all kinds of medicine people. And he met the healers from Siberia, who are called shamans.
Mm-hmm.
And the word became warped, became shaman, and is not, it's like saying, you know, we talk about Kleenex, right?
That thing of language, yes, what we do
Right?
with language.
But there's a lot of tissue papers that isn't Kleenex, but we
Or
still
bleach.
refer to it as, excuse me?
Or bleach.
Or bleach. Yeah, whatever. So shamanism has become like this, but like where I go in Ecuador, they wouldn't call themselves shamans. They call themselves taitas, they call themselves nyachaks, they call themselves mamitas, they call, you know, whatever. So there is a prophecy, and I believe it is a worldwide prophecy. Don't quote me. I only know it from the people that I've worked with in South America, which is there will come a time when the condor and the eagle will fly together in the sky.
Yes, yes.
And the way Shairi explains it, he's one of the healers that I work with. He wrote a book, Las Siete Plumas del Cóndor,
Yes, yes.
and which is a beautiful book. I don't think it's in English, where he talks about this, that we need to bring, we were talking earlier about connecting the heart to the head, and that what he says is that the healers are too much in their heart, but not enough in their head.
Yeah.
They don't think, you know, and we're too much in our head and not enough in our heart. And so where the prophecy is that we are coming together. And of course, it's going to take time.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, just the fact that we're having this conversation is a way that we are preserving and broadcasting the unknown to so many people in this country. The other thing is, I don't know if you're familiar with Emma Bragdon.
No.
She's I can't remember if she's a psychologist or something, right? She's like a psychologist. And she wrote this book. She does a lot of work around what she calls spiritual emergence and spiritual emergency. And she talks about how in this country, schizophrenia, psychotic episode, etc., is actually often a spiritual emergence. or
Absolutely.
emergency.
I mean, that's the whole premise behind transpersonal psychology, which is
Right,
the kind of psychology I studied. Yeah.
right, right.
Mm-hmm.
So that what happened is somebody has a psychotic break,
Mm-hmm.
which is, and like, for example, I have a client who just had like this mega Kundalini experience.
Mm-hmm.
She was shaking all the time. She was hot
Mm-hmm.
and cold. She couldn't sleep. Da 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 da.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to see her primary doctor, who said, "You should take these pills." And I said, "No." And so I sent her to acupuncture, and I sent her
Uh,
to, and we grounded. And I sent her to my friend Claudia, who did grounding, exercises, and showed her how to use this very powerful energy in a good way. But if she had continued with the pills, she
God
would
knows.
be in.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I think that when you and I have this conversation, that they get disseminated is a way to awaken people's
Mm-hmm.
memory
Mm-hmm.
of the capacity for healing.
Yes. Yes. Which is
Because we
mindfulness, right?
all have it. People
Yeah.
said to me, "Aren't you worried about cultural appropriation?" Well, first of all, I'm a quarter Latina, so no.
Mm-hmm.
And I am not pretending to be a curandera.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking people to remember their own tradition
Mm-hmm.
of healing.
Right, which is at the heart of mindfulness. We both practice it, right? And mindfulness is an indigenous way, and it reminds us mindfulness equals remembering, right? And remembering is about going back to here and going back to the earth. So, I've been the reason I started these conversations is exactly what you were saying. I want to continue the oral traditions, to create records in the way that we can now. And I also want to establish, to reclaim presence, right? We are seeing in the mindfulness world in this country, we are seeing how more and more voices of colors are being projected, but that's not easy, right? It hasn't been an easy journey. So you have been able to penetrate important venues such as the Omega Institute, the Cripple Center, and even NYU, and other things in your journey. So, and you have been using, the ceremonies, the characteristics of many indigenous healing systems in areas where Western psychotherapy has been the main guidance, right? So my question is, in your experience, what opened doors and what closes them in us bringing these messages or instituting these ancestral practices?
Wow, that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
Um, so I've always been a little bit of a rebel. And so I just kind of, I don't know. I mean, I've been exiled from many circles because I've been called a loose cannon.
Yeah.
In terms of Omega, Kripalu, and the New York Open Center, the truth is, um, I have a very, very good friend who's very active in those circles, and that's how I got in.
Mhm. And
Um,
it's so well, and also because they have been the places though that have been open to the indigenous, the ancestral ways of being. I mean, thank God for those places.
Right, right.
However, what I would like to see, as we are seeing now in the mindfulness world, where more and more Black and indigenous voices and other people of color are being permitted to, which is so, because what is it? It's all indigenous, wisdom. And yet it has been, I mean, you mentioned appropriation. It's almost laughable at the way in which it has been propelled in this country. But okay, it's changing, and thank God that we have so many voices there. So I celebrate those places. I support them. The Insight Meditation Society is another place that really is acknowledging and celebrating. But I'm always wondering, how do we help them open up even more and see us even more?
So, as my friend Joanne would say, when I started doing this work,
Mhm.
I wore a pencil skirt and high heels. And I would dress very formally because I wanted to look the right way.
Mhm.
So every time I walked out in my pencil skirt and high heels, my friends would say, "Oh, you're going to give a lecture." And when I worked in a venue like one of the universities or one of the training programs and started talking about all this stuff, I looked as conservative as I possibly could. Because I figured that, if I walked in with flowing skirts and nose ring, which I don't have, but uh, I, I would be dismissed off.
Mhm.
And so I wore the costume.
Mhm. Mhm.
So for people who are just beginning
Mhm.
to move into, I mean, and I don't think anybody wears pencil skirts anymore, but
Thank God.
years ago, I know. Oh my God, I can't
Or
believe it.
high heel.
Or high heels. I still have one pair because I'm 4'11", and sometimes I want to look tall. But so my recommendation is that if you're working in an institution that is pretty mainstream and you want to begin to start informing, changing, look the part. Blend in your costume. It's a costume. No matter what we wear, it's a costume, right?
I guess it's a way of respecting wherever you go, just blend in. But that's a charge one. Actually, we're going to have another conversation for this one, because this is a complex one.
Yeah, I don't do that anymore. I walk in jeans and whatever.
Mm, mm,
But I started in 1984.
mhm, mhm.
Um, and maybe it was my own insecurity.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean, who knows, right?
yeah. Well, the times, as I said, times have changed, right? So the reason I'm saying we have to have this conversation further, because I'm thinking, the issue of hair, for instance, for indigenous and specifically African communities, has taken a long way, and it has done a lot of damage when people were told that their hair, or not people, I have the hair that is now well received, and I've never gave in. I never combed my hair in the way that people consider it acceptable. Thank God that I'm finally in fashion now. my nieces were saying, Tia, you're finally in fashion after all these years. But I think it's the theme is very complex, and I hope you will come back, because I think you and I have so much to tease apart and to share with people, and seriously, our work come together in so many ways that I want you back. So
An honor.
what other words of wisdom do you have for our listeners as a closing, and how can they contact you?
I have a website. It's my name.
Mhm.
Parting word is live with gratitude.
Mhm. I love that.
It
I love
changes
that.
your life.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Speaking of that, I'm incredibly grateful for having met you, that our path crossed,
I know,
and
it's so cool.
and I thank you so much for
Pleasure.
sharing your Sunday. So to our listeners, thank you for tuning in today to What a Word is Worth. You can access today's interview at Anchor and YouTube. And if you are interested, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app. And also, if you found our program beneficial, leave us a review. I am with you in love and compassion always. Thank you.